Hi everyone, welcome back to Digital ELA LOT. This is the second part to our fourth lesson about detail questions. Like always, go and watch Aisha's video first. She'll go over the passage and do the worksheet in her description, and then come back and we'll go over the answers together about detail questions. Let's get started. So really quickly, we'll go over some do's and don'ts for detailed questions. I'll pretty much summarize what's in both of the columns. So the main important thing to take away from detailed questions is to go back to the passage. So when we are asked a very specific question, which detailed questions are usually very specific, there's always going to be a direct answer in the passage. So that is the easiest way to make sure that you get it correct. Oftentimes, when it's telling us to go to a specific line or a specific paragraph, it's important to kind of skim around to just understand the context of what we're being asked. So that can make it much easier to answer the question as well. And when you do get a question that's very specific and you find the answer in the passage, you pretty much already know the answer. Now you just have to go back, look at all of the choices, and find which one is closest to the answer choice that you already know based on going back from the passage. So here are some don'ts. It's really important, which I'm going to stress when I'm going over the answers, that we are really specific on what the question is asking us, because a lot of times in detailed questions, there's going to be a lot of relevant information in all the answer choices, but it's not going to answer the specific question. So that is something that will really help us get the right answer for these types of questions. So question 1, which statement best describes the central idea of the passage? So for main idea questions, we have to make sure that whatever answer choice it has to summarize the entire story. So let's think a little bit about this passage. In the beginning, we hear about Great Zimbabwe. It's kind of a fable, it's a story, we don't really know about it. Later on, we get into different people's thoughts on the origins of Great Zimbabwe. And finally, at the end of the passage, we finally understand the origins of Great Zimbabwe. So that's kind of the main progression, and it covers pretty much the whole entire story. So now we can look at the different answer choices. So choice A, Great Zimbabwe was an enormous stone city thought to be home to some of the greatest treasure of ancient history. So this is a description of the Great Zimbabwe, but it doesn't give us the idea of the entire passage and the whole entire progression. Choice B, mysteries related to Great Zimbabwe continue to interest historians and explorers, even though archaeologists have confirmed its origins. So this doesn't really describe the central idea of the passage. It's talking about how people are still interested in the origins of Great Zimbabwe, but that's a present tense. It doesn't give us a summary of what happened in the passage. Choice C, the history of Great Zimbabwe was subject to much speculation until modern archaeologists definitively determined its origins. So choice C makes sense because it covers that a lot of different archaeologists had different ideas for the origins of Great Zimbabwe, but finally, at the end, modern archaeologists found out what the actual origins were. Choice D, early missteps in the study and excavation of the Great Zimbabwe ruins led to the loss of valuable evidence about the city. So this was a very specific detail that was mentioned, but it doesn't give us, again, an entire summary of the whole passage. The answer is C. Question 2, what was the main way that Karl Mach's conclusions about Great Zimbabwe in paragraph 4 affected later archaeological investigations? So here we have to know exactly what they're asking. They're asking how this guy's conclusions affected later investigations. And it even gives us a paragraph so we know exactly what to look for, paragraph 4. So we go back to paragraph 4 and we figure out that Mach had rediscovered the city and he had said that it had been built by the Queen of Sheba. And later on it says, archaeology was still in its infancy, and Hall, a different archaeologist, convinced that the structures had been built by ancient people from the Middle East, dug up and discarded archaeological deposits that would have revealed much about the true history of Zimbabwe. So Hall was convinced by Mauch's conclusions that they had already figured out that the origins were from the Middle East. So this led him to discard a lot of information and deposits that would have been useful in actually figuring out what the real conclusions were. That's what we're kind of talking about in detailed questions, that it asks us something so specific that if we really do go back to the text and find our own answer, we can find the answer choice that most clearly lines up with it. So choice A, Archaeologists from all over Europe became interested in excavating the area. Even in the first paragraph, it talks about how archaeologists had always been interested in excavating the area. He was just the first one who was actually able to. Choice B, archaeologists made assumptions about the history of the ruins before excavating. So Mauch's conclusions was before anyone even excavated. So because of that, we see that other archaeologists, such as Hall, threw away a bunch of information that could have been useful because they just assumed they already knew the origins. But we have to look at all the answer choices. So choice C, archaeologists started to believe that many of the past accounts recorded about the ruins were true. So this doesn't tell us how it affected the later archaeological investigations. It just tells us how archaeologists thought. It didn't say how it actually physically affected them. Choice D, archaeologists realized that it was unlikely that an ancient culture could build such grand structures. So this isn't talking about either Mauch's conclusions or how it affected, so we can immediately get rid of it. So the answer is B. Question 3, which statement best describes Portuguese explorers' experience searching for Great Zimbabwe? So this is a detailed question, and so we have to look in the passage where it mentions Portuguese explorers, and we have to look for the answer choice that describes their experience. So we see that in paragraph 2, it talks about Portuguese explorers. It says Portuguese explorers regularly visited East Africa, searching for King Solomon's gold, but they never found Great Zimbabwe. So here it automatically tells us what we're looking for. So we have to look at which choice best matches it. And choice A says they routinely visited East Africa but never located the city. So that's just the direct answer choice going back to the text. We don't even need to look through the other choices because it tells us exactly what the text said. So the answer is A. So question 4, what was, quote, one mystery of Great Zimbabwe, paragraph 6, that had been solved? So it's a detailed question, and it gives us the paragraph, which is the last paragraph, and it basically says, after all of this discussion about different competing theories about the origins of Great Zimbabwe, that mystery had been solved. So people really didn't know what the origins were until the very end when modern archaeologists found out. For questions like this, we already know the answer. Choice D is who had built the settlement. This is a detailed question, but it also has to do with the whole passage, so you don't even have to look at the other ones because this is the only answer that is correct. So question 5, which statement about the Shona people is best supported by the passage? So it's asking us specifically about the Shona people. So we have to ask ourselves, where are they mentioned? And they're mentioned in the 5th paragraph, and it's basically saying that the ancestors of the present-day Shona people were the people who built Great Zimbabwe. So now we have to look at the answer choices. Choice A, they live along the east coast of Africa. Well, they even say that they don't live on the coast of Africa. They live inland. So we can get rid of that because it's false. Choice B, they are descendants of the people who built Great Zimbabwe. Yeah, that was specifically what we said, and it was right given in the passage. It's pretty clear when we know exactly what we're looking for because Shona people are only mentioned in one paragraph, so we can just look right in the paragraph and find the answer. Choice C, they lived in the Middle East before settling in Africa. Again, they don't go into the specifics of the Shona people, so we can get rid of this one. Choice D, they were once ruled by King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. These connections were never made. They talked about King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba in the beginning when they were talking about Middle Eastern history, which is not this history that we're talking about now. So we know that the answer is B. So question 6, the conclusions of David Randall McLever and Gertrude Cadden Thompson were significant because they. So here we have two names, so we have to look on where they're mentioned. And again, they're mentioned in the 5th paragraph, and they're said that they are the modern archaeologists that discovered the actual true origins of Great Zimbabwe. If we remember that they actually concluded that it was African in origin, it says it specifically, it says that they, quote, concluded that the ruins were unmistakably African in origin. So that is their contribution to the passage. So right here, we can look at the answer choices and skim through them, and we see that choice D is revealed that Great Zimbabwe was African in origin. Since this is a detailed question, this was so explicitly said in the 5th paragraph that we just know that this is the answer, and we can get rid of the other answer choices. Question 7, which excerpt describes a challenge that David Randall McLever and Gertrude Cadden Thompson faced in their attempts to find out more about Great Zimbabwe? So when I read this question, I want to know exactly what it's asking. So I just circle a challenge, and then we know exactly where to look for because we already looked for those two names. And we're trying to find what stopped them from finding Great Zimbabwe easily. Choice A, by the 16th century, Portuguese explorers regularly visited East Africa searching for King Solomon's gold, but they never found Great Zimbabwe. So this is talking about Portuguese explorers, not talking about what we're looking for, which is McLiver and Caden Thompson, so we can get rid of it. Choice B, another mystery remains. Why was the settlement at Great Zimbabwe abandoned, leaving the magnificent stone architecture to fall into ruins? So this doesn't talk about a challenge that they faced at all. It doesn't even mention them, so we can get rid of them. Choice C, Hall, convinced that the structure had been built by ancient people from the Middle East, dug up and discarded archaeological deposits that would have revealed much about the true history of Great Zimbabwe. Later European excavation destroyed even more valuable evidence. So even though this answer choice doesn't directly say the words McLiver or Caden Thompson, it does say that all this evidence that could have helped McLiver and Caden Thompson find out the actual origins of Great Zimbabwe was destroyed. So that would have been a huge challenge because they couldn't use all of this evidence to help them. They had to start from scratch, basically. And choice D, throughout the city, each stone was precisely fitted to the others without the use of a mortar. So this, again, doesn't describe a challenge at all. This is more of a description. So this question is a little bit hard, so we had to go through and do process of elimination because we may not see right away that C is the right answer, but we definitely can see why the other ones are the wrong answers. So the answer is C. Question 8, which statement best summarizes the reason Portuguese explorers wanted to find Great Zimbabwe? Okay, so we're looking for the reason that they wanted to find Great Zimbabwe. So we go back to paragraph 2 where they mention the Portuguese explorers, and we see that the reports to the Europeans of Great Zimbabwe were spread thousands of years ago by Arab traders who had seen the east coast of Africa. The traders told the fabulous wealth of a mysterious stone city in the African interior. And goes on to talk about the traders' tales, these Arab traders. And then it later says that Portuguese explorers went and tried to find it because they heard about this wealth from the Arab traders. So now we see which answer choice matches the most. Choice A, they had heard reports from Arab traders that the city was incredibly wealthy and contained King Solomon's gold mines. So that's exactly what we're talking about in paragraph 2. When you know where to look, it tells us the answers right there for us. So we know this is the answer. We can quickly look through the other ones. Choice B is talking about a historian that was quoted later on, but it was quoted after they talked about Arab traders, and he's actually quoting stories that he heard from Arab traders, so he doesn't really have to do with it. So choice C, the city was famous for its production of beads and wares that could not be purchased elsewhere in Africa or the Middle East. So this is not the reason that they wanted to go. We already know the reason is the wealth, they're searching for the wealth that they had heard from these Arab traders. And then choice D, the city contained towering walls and structures up to 30 feet high and 20 feet thick, some built into the bluffs surrounding the city. So these observations weren't given to us until later on when they actually discovered Great Zimbabwe. So it's in a later paragraph, so we don't have to worry about it. And so the answer is A. So question 9, which excerpt best describes the methods used to confirm David Randall McLiver and Gertrude Cadden Thompson's conclusions? So what is this question asking us? It's asking us to describe the methods used to confirm these two people's conclusions. So that's what we're looking for specifically. So choice A, in the 20th century, after excavating areas that had not been disturbed, David Randall McLiver, a Scottish Egyptologist, and Gertrude Cadden Thompson, an English archaeologist, it's a mouthful, concluded that the ruins were unmistakably African in origin. So this just tells us what the conclusions were. It doesn't tell us the methods that were used to confirm them in any way. So we can get rid of this one. It's a little confusing because it says their names, but we can also get rid of it. Choice B, Great Zimbabwe was most likely built during the 14th or 15th century by the ancestors of the present-day Shona people. Recent carbon-14 dating supports their conclusion. So here it tells us a method, which is carbon-14 dating. And so we don't necessarily have to even know what carbon-14 dating means, but we know that whatever it is, it supports their conclusion. So their conclusion, McLiver and Caden Thompson's conclusion, we already know from before, is that the origins of Great Zimbabwe were definitely African, and here it confirms that. So this is the correct answer choice. We can get rid of C and D pretty easily because it mentions Richard Hall, and it's talking about investigations that were before McLiver and Caden Thompson's. We even see that the first two choices say paragraph 5, and then the last two say paragraph 4. So it's before we were even introduced to these two scientists that we're talking about now. So we can get rid of those pretty immediately. So the answer is B. Okay, question 10. Which statement about Great Zimbabwe is best supported by the passage? So now we have a really clear understanding of the passage. Let's just do a process of elimination. So choice A, Great Zimbabwe was an ancient city of Middle Eastern origins that was built by the Queen of Sheba. So we already mentioned that we know the origins were African. We know that Queen of Sheba wasn't, so we can just get rid of this one. Choice B, Great Zimbabwe's history as a Portuguese trading city meant that it was heavily populated and extremely wealthy. So we already talked about how the Portuguese never even got to Great Zimbabwe, so we can get rid of this answer because it's not true. Choice C, Great Zimbabwe was abandoned by wealthy Shona kings in the 15th century and quickly fell into ruin. So we never talked about how it was abandoned. Even in the last paragraph, it says, another mystery remains. Why was the settlement at Great Zimbabwe abandoned? So we have no idea, so we can't conclude that because it's not supported in the passage. And finally, choice D. Great Zimbabwe was a major inland city of African origins that contained around 20,000 people. So this was actually explicitly said in the 5th paragraph, saying Great Zimbabwe was once home to an estimated 20,000 people, also said that it was inland and it was African origins. So this is a detailed question as well, and it's directly given to us in the passage. So the answer is D. So here's the overall answer key. I hope you guys didn't find this too hard. I think that detailed questions don't have to be hard if you don't want them to be. You just have to go back to the text and make sure you really know what the question is asking you. Something I did to make my life easier is as I saw the questions, I circled directly the specific thing that they were asking me. So whether or not finding a challenge or finding a specific detail, just to know exactly what you're looking for. And that will make your life much easier with detailed questions. So thank you guys so much for watching. We really miss you and we hope that you're watching these videos. We'll be back next week with another one and I hope you're all staying safe. Bye.